Yeah, guys. And speaking of bad writers and crappy comic book movies, Sony has decided to end their foray into the Marvel universe. And this
Terrible
is just
news.
hilarious
Terrible.
because it comes right after the release of Kraven the Hunter, and we're going to get into that in a second. But basically, after a string of like really bad movies, like Venom, say what you will about Venom, they're not good movies. Morbius, Madame Web, and now Kraven the Hunter. Sony has just been taking loss after loss on the chin and basically being reamed by fans by saying like these movies are really bad. Like they're so bad they're almost comically, they're almost comedies. They're like up there with The Room, right? So Sony basically said like, okay, enough throwing good money after bad. We tried to spin off our own Spider-Verse off of the back of the MCU success, but it's not working. So we're just going to stop. And by all accounts, Kraven the Hunter is going to be the last Marvel movie that Sony is involved in other than the Spider-Man movies. They're still going to go forward with Into the Spider-Verse, the third movie. They're going to do the next Spider-Man Home movie. And they're also doing this TV series with Nicolas Cage with Spider-Man Noir. So the core Spider-Man stuff is still going forward, but all like their hopes to like take all the Spider-Man villains and side characters and make them their own franchises are no longer going forward. But I want to start off with Sean on this. So Sean, before we get into Sony basically putting the kibosh on this, you actually saw Kraven the Hunter. I don't know if anyone else on the panel saw Kraven the Hunter, but you had some very interesting opinions on it. Would you care to share what you thought about Sony's last foray into the Marvel universe?
So this was one of my most memorable and fun times at the movies this year for all the wrong reasons. I saw like very shortly into the film, everyone in my theater figured out we are watching a terrible movie. And it like at the beginning, there's this like 30-minute long flashback about Kraven's childhood, which is as bad as you'd expect it to be. And it gets to one point in time where young Kraven like yells at his dad, "I wish you had died." And then it pauses and my theater just goes, and for the rest of the movie, we're just laughing out loud at the film because it's just every line of dialogue. It seems like it was written by an alien that's never spoken to a human. There's a line of dialogue in this movie where a character goes, "Shortly afterwards, my grandmother died, and then I never saw her again." Like, right, she died. Like, what do you? And you think this is a movie that was reshot, delayed a year. There's so much ADR, and that line of dialogue with that delivery made it into the film. What was all the stuff they cut? What were the lines of dialogue they changed? If that was one of the ones that went, that's good enough, let's keep that one. The main actress or the female lead in this movie, she won an Oscar, and the next thing she did in this movie, and there's so many lines of dialogue where she's like, "I don't kill people. I am a lawyer." Like, you have an Oscar. How did you deliver that line?
Right.
And we're just laughing from beginning to end. The structure, it's like Daredevil with Ben Affleck. It's that level of structuring that we figured out this doesn't really work, but they went back to that. But yeah, we were laughing out loud. And as soon as the credits start rolling, our theater was like clapping. There was applause. We went out in the lobby and we were just quoting our favorite terrible lines, just roasting the film. I mean, it was just shockingly, it's a revenge movie. How difficult is it to make a fun revenge movie if Aaron Taylor Johnson is slapping bear traps on people's heads? How do you botch that? And they did. So it was like, it's impressive how they're able to take Oscar-winning actors, a very simple genre to deliver what people want, and they just crap out laughably bad movies. So I loved it. It was amazing. A+.
Yeah, you said it was like The Room of comic book movies.
That was the conversation out in the hallway. Everyone's like, this is like The Room of comic book movies. Don't watch it just by yourself. But if you bring all of your rowdy friends, maybe bring in some alcohol or some other fun substances, and you will have the time of your life just roasting this film.
Yeah, and before that, it was Madame Web held that moniker. And then before that was Morbius. It's Morbin time. So how do you think that the Kraven film played a role in Sony's decision to basically say, okay, we're not doing this anymore?
I mean, I think you just look at it and you go, we're putting out like really bad movies. We are the laughing stock of the internet. Nobody, just like foundationally, these are terrible ideas. We don't think these villains are good enough to be the villain in our Spider-Man movie, but we think they're good enough to throw $150 million at them by themselves. Like, it doesn't even make any sense. And whoever the producer executive is that's running this branch are just putting out terrible movies that, like, stop and think. If the high mark that people are like, well, the good one is Venom. That's crazy. That's insane. If that's like, well, I mean, that one is almost competent. That's like the craziest franchise out there. If that's the best that you've got. And, you know, Madame Web lost a ton of money. Morbius lost a ton of money. People are laughing at them. They're getting chatter and buzz for all the wrong reasons. The actors don't want to promote them. Like Dakota Johnson, when she was like doing the press tour, wanted to talk about anything else besides the terrible movie that she was in. And she was desperately trying not to go, I mean, yeah, the movie sucks, but I have to promote it contractually. So they have to see that and realize no one wants to sign on because they know it's going to get ruined by the producers. No one wants to star in it because they're just embarrassing themselves. Even if you give them $20 million, they don't want that stain on their reputation. So why would it continue? There's no wins here. It's only losses on every single level and huge losses because this is going to lose the money, reputation, all of it.
I don't know why we haven't gotten a Vulture movie yet.
Yeah. I don't know why you guys are insistent on always dogging the masterpiece that is Morbius, because that movie is fantastic, and I don't care what any of you say. We all like to Morb every once in a while.
Ironically, Madame Web was the biggest thing to happen to Sydney Sweeney because it got her out in front of a big male audience that then instantly latched onto her. It's kind of interesting.
Rare thing to happen.
Yeah. She failed upward through that movie. But Odin, I want to ask you about the economics behind this, because this seems to me to be more of an economic decision because Sony's realizing like these movies don't make money. And they could probably do a better job just licensing out these characters back to Marvel for use in Marvel movies and not have to deal with any of the headaches of production. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the last hurrah for them as far as having any faith in this may have actually been back when Morbius first came out. And the reason why was because if y'all remember when that film came out and it had an abysmal weekend, I think it theoretically may have been better. I'll have to look at the numbers than the Madame Web in this one. But there was obviously no real interest in the film. The film was bombing and no one was going to see it. But then there was this huge movement online through memes to make fun of it, right? It's Morbin time, right? And this became this huge thing. And then what Sony did was stupidly think, oh, that means people love this movie. Mm-hmm. That means they're going to want to go see it. So we're putting it back into more theaters this weekend. Hey, everybody, it's Morbin time. Go see it. And no one saw it. So like, I think that was like their, okay, online movements that really doesn't oftentimes translate to real life. And that may have been the moment they were like, okay, yeah, let's just go ahead and not do anything for Kraven. And then just let's just, go off into a corner somewhere and try to figure things out. So yeah, this movie is going to be yet another flop, $110 million, which is about what they would typically spend on like the Venom films. They cost about the same amount of money. So it's kind of amazing that they're making these movies, which like, as far as like visual effects and stuff like that, they're not good, but they're also not like complete garbage. Like if they had a decent story behind them, most people would probably be willing to forgive some of the effects not having as clean or as polished a look. But I mean, it kind of is amazing that they're able to do some of these films and some of these set pieces for half of the money. And if they just had a better team behind them, they actually could be pretty decent movies. But unfortunately, they don't. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what their plans are going to be for the future, since it seems that the Venom franchise is done. Those films continue to make money somehow. And clearly they've given up on this universe. The only thing that honestly could have saved Kraven is if I had a post-credit scene. I've been mentioning this a couple times. If there was a post-credit scene where it was Kraven, Morbius, and Madame Web all sitting at a table eating shawarma, that would have been a great throwback. And I actually would have gone to see this on opening night just to see that moment because of how stupid this all is.
Well, Brian, speaking of stupid, one of the things that came out with this announcement was that Sony had the rights to use the Tom Holland Spider-Man character, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man character with impunity. Like they could have put him in anything that they wanted to do, right?
Right.
And so like, but some genius over at Sony said like, hey, I have an idea. Let's take all the characters that rely on Spider-Man to be interesting and make them in their own movies without Spider-Man.
Right.
And so like a lot of people are like, dude, if you had the rights to use Spider-Man, why didn't you use Spider-Man? Like, because that's the thing that people want to see. So what's your take on that? Do you think that Sony's just being run by complete idiots?
I think that someone over there had a good idea, and this idea was a good idea. It was, we need to let's do what Phase 1 Marvel did, and let's build up our catalog, and then have, then start doing crossovers and have a balls out Spider-Man fight at the end. And in order to do that, we need to increase the popularity of these characters like Kraven the Hunter, Vulture, Madame Web, whatever, right? Especially Madame Web, she would be a big part of that, considering the comic books. So we need to increase their popularity. So we need to make movies where people can see these characters and fall in love with these characters, so normies can like them. And then we'll make a movie with Spider-Man. The problem is, great. I mean, that's a great plan, but the execution of the plan is not working out. These movies are not only bad, but it feels like the corners are cut. Like Madame Web had clearly what sounded like AI dialogue in it. It only missed like, I was at one point waiting for Madame Web to be like, okay, folks, open her dialogue with some typical AI thing, because they utilize AI with that script for sure. The editing was all over the place. It's like they have this really cool plan. They have the Kevin Feige plan, but they have no one to execute that plan. And they keep hiring people that are disconnected from what they're actually trying to do. And I don't really understand it, because, yeah, Sean's right. There's award-winning actors, actresses, and talent in part of these movies, and they can't seem to land the most simple. Like a revenge story is the most simple story, and they can't land that. Like, man, I could see Madame Web being a little harder to accomplish, but even that was so simplistic. Like they made it the dumbest possible version of that character, and they couldn't make that remotely good. The editing was off. There was too much. There was somehow same exact thing. We're gonna edit this for time so it can play more in theaters. But then you leave shit in there that has nothing to do with the story. It's such a weird. I can't explain it. It's like maybe they have like the same editor they keep going to, and the same certain talent that works at Sony that just doesn't know what they're doing, and no one wants to tell them so. I'm confused.
Just to be, what's the word? I don't know. But Sony isn't discontinuing the whole Sony Spider-Verse. They're just stopping making these movies of these adjacent villain characters, correct? Because they're still making a Spider-Man 4. They're still making, the Miles Morales cartoon things, right? So it's not like they're not. It's not
they're
like
not going to get rid of Spider.
They're not done making Spider-Man movies.
Of course not.
They're just done making these. They're just done making these nonsense side movies. With these villains that should be in the movies with Spider-Man.
You should just make Spider-Man movies and have these characters as part of them.
Right.
I don't know what we're doing.
Speaking of not knowing what we're doing, Mr. Butters, I know that no, this isn't about him, but the guy who
that's how it sounded, man. It sounded like a huge insult. Like, speaking of not knowing what he's doing.
No, I'm actually referring to Alex Kurtzman, because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Alex Kurtzman was the architect of all these movies.
Shocker.
Because back in the day, he was the first movie he was set to direct was Venom, and he was over at Sony planning out what he would call the build up to the Sinister Six movie, right? Mm-hmm. But because all the characters were going to be, protagonists or good guys, it was renamed to the Superior Six, right? But like all these movies, Morbius, Madame Web, Venom, Kraven the Hunter, these were all brainchilds of Alex Kurtzman. And after he was kind of like removed from the equation, they just kind of like went along with like his overarching plan. But the brains behind this are Avi Arad, I believe, and Amy Pascal, who was the former head of Sony. And they've proven time and time again that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to this stuff. But Dutch, I want to ask you, what is the mentality behind like, hey, let's take villains and make them the central figure of their own movie, but not have them be villains?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess everybody has to have an origin story, right? I mean, I think traditionally, I've always been more intrigued by the bad guys, and I don't think I'm alone. I think bad guys are way more interesting when you get right down to it. You know, what's their motivation, what drives them, what made them evil, and maybe they were trying to capture some of that kind of thing with these characters. I don't know. I mean, why do people like me like Darth Vader? You know, why do I have a wall of Darth Vader stuff back here on my wall? You know, why are people enamored with the bad guys? You know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I think, like you said, though, they were trying to do some kind of weird bad guy cinematic universe to get us all interested in a Sinister Six thing. And I think they just kind of went about it in the wrong way. They should have had these guys introduced in actual Spider-Man movies instead of trying to make their own little weird pocket universe with them. So I don't know.
It's like they're trying to reduce everything into a formula. That the Avengers, like, you can reduce it to a formula, but that doesn't mean you can just translate to everything else and it will work. But that's what these executives, that they don't know anything about the fandom. They don't understand. There's actually no demand for a prequel to the origin story about 5D level Spider-Man side characters. Like, they don't understand that, but they just know that's what they own. So let's apply the MCU formula to that. And it's like, it doesn't actually make any sense. It leaves out, you have to have talented storytellers and you have to have an idea where there's an actual demand. There's a story to tell there that makes sense. And so it's this very bizarre thinking that's bean counters getting to make creative decisions rather than visionary storytellers that actually understand the fandom and the source material. So there's this huge disconnect.
Yeah, and Sean, you know what's weird is, like, so Sony had actually kind of set the groundwork for what could potentially be like interesting, like Spider-Man spinoffs. So like at the end of the first Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, you had the Vulture in jail meeting Scorpion, right? And that was like an in credit scene where you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then I believe it was No Way Home, you had Venom crossover into the Tom Holland universe, and that could have been something that they could have really had a lot of fun with, because you know, who's a better Spider-Man villain than you know, Venom? You know, especially like when Spider-Man had the symbiote before Eddie Brock did, right? So there are all these like connective threads that could have gone in very interesting directions, but Sony just chose not to use them. What do you think was the mentality behind that?
I mean, this is one of those situations I can't wait until we get some tell-all book or documentary when everyone's allowed to say what on earth was going on, because it is a scenario where it seems like there's so many shockingly bad decisions that seem devoid of logic, where obviously it would make sense to do Venom and Spider-Man. And now we've done a full trilogy, and it's the fact that they did a post-credit scene teasing the crossover and then didn't do it, that's like malpractice. That's insanity. Like, what on earth are you doing? Except until you go, there's probably like very strong competing producers that are like, the MCU side are like, we don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Please knock it off. Please stop doing that. We don't want to touch your stink. Don't get that on us. You're going to hurt our box office draw just to try and amp yours up a little bit. So I assume it's like that weird competing side to it, the different branches of it. Because like last year they put out Across the Spider-Verse, and then this year they followed up with Madame Web. The disconnect in creative merit between those two products coming from the same Sony film studio is crazy. And it only makes sense if they're working in different towers, and certain ones, there's like 3 different ones, the Tom Holland one, the Spider-Verse people, and then these morons. But it's crazy.
Yeah, and poor Tom Holland's like, you guys just put me in a movie. I don't what's going on?
Exactly. He has to play Romeo instead. Brian, wanted to ask you, like, as Sony is basically admitting defeat on the comic book front, you also have James Gunn over at Warner Brothers, And it seems like there's a mess over there because like a lot of people are like, okay, so what's canon and what isn't? And he's like, well, the first Peacemaker show, every time we mention something is canon, except when the Justice League shows up at the end, that's not canon because we're not using those characters anymore, blah, blah, blah. And it feels like DC is almost like on the cusp of what Sony's going through right now, where it's like so convoluted, so bizarre that, and it doesn't seem like Creature Commandos was blowing anything up. So
I loved it though.
So what's your take on the DC universe compared to like what Sony's going through?
I mean, the DC universe is yet to materialize. I understand that James Gunn has to make some changes to what's canon, what's not. He doesn't want to get rid of Peacemaker. To be fair, Peacemaker was outstanding show. Of course, he doesn't want to get rid of it, and that's his show. He wrote it, so he needs to somehow be able to wrap that in to the canon without too many plot holes. And so that's the best way to do that is say, you know what, this part of it is not part of my universe. It's not that unreasonable. And as far as the actual universe itself goes, first off, Creature Commandos is actually pretty damn good. It's a cartoon. It's not going to get as much play as live action is going to get, but it's really well done. It's unapologetically just fun. And if James Gunn approaches DC with in the mind of a fan who loves the material and is not trying to push an agenda and is unapologetic about having fun with this universe, then I think it's going to be a good time for DC fans. And while I love the Zack Snyder stuff, I don't really like Zack Snyder, but I liked that universe, and I love Henry Cavill. I'm looking forward to the next to the James Gunn verse, whatever you want to call it. I'm looking forward to it because I feel like it's actually being handled by a small group of extremely talented individuals who want the best for for DC, for that DC universe, and not for whatever studio happens to own them that day. And this is important that the top of the creative pyramid is James Gunn, who is very, very good at his job. And he has a partner with Peter Safran, who's doing all the administrative stuff. One of them is very, very good at how to handle the money and the business side of it. And one's very good at the creative side of it. And you have this team at the top of DC finally, who is creating a roadmap and personally invested in these movies to try to make the best possible DC. I mean, we are potentially going to see a best case scenario for DC. And if for some reason these movies don't land and it doesn't work out, then I think the comic book era is dead. I think it's officially dead. If this combination of creative talent with all the freedoms they have and everything that they've been given can't land this plane, then I think that just put it on ice. We'll reapproach superheroes in the 30 years.
Speaking of that, Odin, so we went through the golden age of comic book movies, essentially, right? From Iron Man to Endgame, right? But since Endgame, it seems like even Marvel, who kind of pioneered, the comic book formula, can't seem to get it right again. Lightning isn't going to strike twice here. So the DC universe, the Marvel universe, and the Sony universe have all kind of been seeing a pretty steady decline since Endgame came out. Do you think that we're in like the death throes of this genre, or is there a chance that it can be resurrected?
I don't know necessarily of the genre, and I would also argue that it's for the MCU as far as consistency goes, it's been dead since Endgame itself, like including Endgame, because I cannot at all fathom how that film can be seen as being objectively good. I understand why there are moments in there that people enjoy, right? That absolutely makes sense, but the movie is just poorly put together, and it's just a giant mess narratively speaking. And so I remember I loved Infinity War, and then I went to Endgame, and I was like, wow, that was not the film that we really should have gotten there. And everything since then has kind of shown us that they've kind of lost their step ever since really Infinity War being, I think, the last of the really good MCU movies. Now, with the other universes, I think we know, right, when it comes to the Sonyverse stuff, I mean, I think that those have been interesting to watch because the Sony Spider-Man movies specifically, I feel like have, had those like very decent releases where you have, films like Homecoming, Far From Home, Away, and then No Way Home. And I think No Way Home was obviously the peak of that, but a lot of what No Way Home had was a lot of the member berries, was having a lot of the actors from previous films come forward. And honestly, I feel like they have maybe lost the opportunity to capitalize, because that was also the movie, speaking of No Way Home, that destroyed the COVID narrative. Right. That remember, just a week before that, I remember reading those articles, reading Tony over at Deadline.
Right.
Saying like, oh, well, here's the reason why the new remake of West Side Story flopped. It's because of COVID and blah, 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 make excuse after excuse. And then what happened the next weekend? We have $1 billion films on our hands, people. It's like, oh, what was the reason why? Oh, because it actually gave fans what they wanted, because despite the criticism we can have of member berries, when it's done well, that's what fans want, and that's what fans eat up. A great example, No Way Home, Deadpool, Wolverine, both are key examples, I think, of that very, very factor. I don't think DC is going to do it, though, because I know that Brian's a big fan of James Gunn and everything.
James Gunn,
yeah, but I mean, he's only done
unapologetically a fan.
Again, the only film that he's done in the like actual superhero universes that was like very good from beginning to end was the first Guardians film. Everything else he's done has either been just a major step beneath that, or has even been bad. So
name one of his movies that are bad. Name one.
Let's say Guardians 2. I remember nothing about it.
Okay, no, just step outside of MCU. Name a single movie.
I said you didn't listen to me. I said specifically MCU, specifically superhero films.
Okay, so you are discounting the rest of his work.
I'm talking about his work within superhero movies, which is relevant to this discussion about him working within superhero movies.
All of his work has some kind of a sci-fi, tinge of sci-fi to it.
Still just talking about the superhero movies.
So you're just talking about Guardians specifically.
It's okay. No. We're talking about that. We're also talking about Peacemaker as well, because Peacemaker was not that good of a show, dude.
Okay, you're insane.
I'm not insane, dude.
This conversation's over.
I'm reading the chat and everyone's like, it was okay, it was meh, or it was bad. Like, I mean, that's just been the reaction to it.
Peacemaker was good.
And my favorite response was, hey, the theme song was good. And I can agree with that. The theme song was good. I actually really enjoyed the theme song. God. And then once the show started, I was like, oh, that's right, it's this show again. Don't get me even started on The Suicide Squad, which was a completely garbage film.
I'm sorry. You think which one was worse, Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad?
They were both awful, and I don't even want to compare the two.
You gotta compare them.
If I had to put one on to watch, I would put the first Suicide Squad on to watch.
You're insane. You're an insane person.
Hey, at least I can laugh at that one.
Continue.
Right. We have opinions, man. We all have opinions.
But
Suicide Squad is actually a pretty damn good movie. And you have to look at what he had to work with. He was coming from Suicide Squad, which was a complete disaster.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I completely agree that was a disaster.
Movie that is entertaining and fun to watch.
But you guys you're missing the point that Morbius was better than all of them. Okay, so
yes,
now that is a fact.
That's true. Yeah,
let's say if I'll take the I guess what we had to come up with a name for this trilogy of films: Morbius, Madame Web, and now Kraven. There has to be like a perfect name that encapsulates that, because you know what? If there's anything that they might make some money on, if they start to bundle those three movies together and give it like an amazing, just completely just like crap name. No, again, but like to trying to give into the
anthology with like a
we admit this is the bad
artwork.
Yeah, like all right,
all
here's the bad trilogy, or here's the garbage trilogy. Yeah. Would you like to buy garbage today? Go ahead and buy. Like, I would get that anthology. But yeah, so I don't think it's over necessarily, though, because they've shown they can still make money and they can still bring people out if they give people fan service. Like, if they actually return to kind of like the basics of actually giving fans something that they actually want, then we could definitely see a return to that. I just don't think the DC part is going to be really anything to come home to, because DC has just been a mess from the very beginning, with the Snyderverse films, which never were all that great.
Well, I would say that the man who doesn't like pineapple on pizza doesn't like Peacemaker, so there's a little equivalency there.
Good opinions continue on. Yeah. So.
I don't agree with the Peacemaker thing.
John Cena is the greatest actor of our generation.
It's John Cena.
Can't see me. Can't see me.
Or my favorite vine from back in the day with the two flutes.
Well, guys, Sean, this super chat is directly to your take. Rensler for $2. You know, when Sean said, "Oh, it's the room of comic book movies," he says, That's an insult to the room, sir.
You had to be in the room I was in watching Kraven the Hunter, and you would understand. That was a fun theater. You get the right people at the right time. Now, of course, that's not reproducible, so I cannot guarantee the results on the viewing experience watching Kraven the Hunter. I just happened to be in a really, really fun room watching a really, really bad movie.
I know exactly what happened, what you experienced, because when I watched Fast X in theaters, I think I went opening night, and everyone was just watching like it was a regular movie. Everything was fine. And at the very beginning of the movie, he has this moment where he's with Letty in their bedroom, and the camera pans over a shot of their wedding, and he's in a fucking white wife beater, and the crowd, the entire audience loses it. Everyone starts laughing, everyone starts hooting and hollering, and from then on out, every time Dom said family or there was something crazy that happens, everyone's just screaming and yelling. And then when we left the theater, it was like a weird, we all just met, but we're all friends now moment. It was the greatest night of my movie viewing life, and it was for Fast X, which is one of the worst. It might be the worst Fast movie.
So Morbius, how is your sex life? Yes.